Hello everyone and welcome to Game 9 of the World Chess Championship match between Nepomniachtchi and the Ding Liren. After the first 8 games, the score is now 4.5 points for Nepo and 3.5 points for Ding, so Nepo is leading by a full point, and the Ding will now try to get back into the match. He already did it a few times. Can he do it again? Last game he almost did it with the white pieces, and just when we thought that every game is going to be a decisive game because we've had 4 decisive games in a row, game 8 ended in a draw. So let's see what happened in this one. And before we check it out, here is a nice photo of the ceremonial first move being made by Marat Azakhanov. He's the deputy chairman of the Assembly of the People of Kazakhstan, striking a nice pose there. Very nicely done by him. So let's check it out. So Nepo with the white pieces opens with pawn to e4, and Ding once again replies with pawn to e5. We have knight to f3, knight to c6, and the bishop to b5. Again, Nepo sticks with the Ruy Lopez, and so far in game 1 and in game 5, Ding continued with pawn to a6 and went for his well, he of course wanted to go for the marshal. Nepo always goes for the anti-marshal. And now knight to f6. We have the Berlin defense, which is very strong for black. It's a very it's a very equalish opening, but then again, you had that candidates tournament where I believe I don't know who played it. I think Levon Arunyan played it with the black pieces. It was a spectacular victory with the Berlin defense, that G5 idea. Maybe it wasn't Levon, I just can't remember. But yeah, I mean, it could go crazy, but more often than not, it usually just ends up being a draw. In the year 2000, in the famous World Chess Championship match between Garry Kasparov and Vladimir Kramnik, Kramnik used it 4 times during the World Chess Championship match to, well, sort of completely subdue Kasparov, and he was unable to do anything, and in the end he just Kasparov just lost 2 games, I think game 2 and game 10, and then Kramnik just became world champion. So it can do a lot, but can it give Ding the win or sort of a chance to bounce back in the match? Let's check it out. We have pawn to d3, bishop to c5 now, and pawn to c3. We have castles by both players, and now castles, and now usually you will see d6 here or rook to e8. Those are the top moves. Rook to e8 is the top move, d6 second most popular, but Ding goes for pawn to d5, and this is sort of a looking for adventure move. Knight b to d2 by Nepo. It's nothing new really. Captures, and now pawn to a5. And here Magnus Carlsen even had this position against Vladimir Kramnik, and queen to c2 was played in that game by Magnus. The game ended in a draw, but here we have pawn to a4. It's a bit of a more popular idea. Queen to e7, and now queen to c2. Again, not a new position. h3 is a known move. Fabiano Caruana played it against Levon Arunyan, even though he lost that game. It was in Leuven, your next move tournament in Belgium in 2018. But here we have queen to c2 by Jan, and now, again, a lot of popular options here. You could go knight to a7 to chase away the bishop, knight to b8, knight to d8. Basically, knight moves are popular here. Maybe some h6 action here. We have knight to b8, going back with the knight, and now rook to e1. Just continuing development nicely. We have rook to d8 by Ding, and now pawn to h3, just taking away the g4 square from Ding's pieces. We have pawn to h6, and now knight to f1. And again, known position. Hikaru Nakamura had it against Wesley So. Their game ended in a draw. Hikaru just brought back the bishop to f1. But here, like I said, knight to f1. We have pawn to c6, and now bishop to c4. And here, there is a game where knight b to d7 was played. A game between Gustas Morunkanas and Oleg Krivonosov that ended by... that actually ended in a draw, even though they've had a bit of a large difference in rating. The player with the white pieces was 1900, and the player with the black pieces was like 2370, so it was a great achievement for white. But here we have knight to a6, and it is now, as of move 14, that we have a completely new game and a completely new position that has never been reached before, and this is basically where our game begins. We have knight to g3 by Nepo, and now we have queen to c7. And this queen to c7 move can be explained by checking what happens if bishop to e6 is played, because you do want to continue developing. You don't want to move the same piece twice in the opening. It's a very cool line, because you're kind of offering the e5 pawn, and the problem is if knight captures on e5, now queen to c7 is problem. for white, as both of the knights are hanging. If you move this knight, then just queen captures on g3, your f2 pawn is pinned. So here you would have to play bishop captures on e6, and after queen captures on e5, there's even the nice Zwischenzug, bishop captures on f7 with check, king captures, and now king h2, avoiding queen captures on g3. Now king g8, and the game continues, but black would have a very nice game here. However, the reason why this was not played is that knight captures on e5 is by no means forced. Here you could also play bishop captures on a6, and then it's also a very fun line. Rook captures on a6, and now knight captures on e5. Bishop captures on h3, now knight captures on f7, a nice capture fest going on here. Now knight to g4 going after the f2 pawn. G captures on h3, attacking the knight here. Bishop captures on f2 with check, king g2, now bishop captures on e1, and now after knight captures on d8, bishop captures on g3, and now king captures on g3. And look at this complete mess here. For example, you save your knight, knight to f6, now queen to d3, guards the knight on d8, and it truly is a mess of a position. It looks like you're gonna lose the knight because of rook to a8, but then there's queen to c4 with check, the knight comes to e6, and so on. But basically the line has been thoroughly analyzed, and it yields nothing more than a draw. So here queen to c7 by Ding, keeping the tension, and now we have bishop back to a2. And here Nepo really did spend his time. He has to consider a lot of moves here, like he has to consider bishop to e3, which is kind of nice because after, let's say, captures and captures, you get the c5 square for your knight, but white already made a nice rook lift here. He can move the knight, get the knight to f5, the rook can go to f3, to g3, put pressure on the black king, and so on. Another thing you could do instead of this bishop to a2 move is put the knight to h4 right away, go for knight to f5, but Nepo says, all right, let's keep it cool, let's go bishop to a2, and now we just wait and see what Ding plays. Basically we're waiting for his move. And while there are many ways Ding could continue this, as the b5 square is no longer controlled by Jan's bishop, Ding just strikes with b5. And okay, queen to e2, putting pressure on the pawn here, and now Ding played rook to b8. And here, Anand in the live coverage said that he didn't really like this rook to b8 idea because it kind of leaves the knight undefended here. If the bishop ever moves, could be a problem. And also that white's moves are sort of easy to find and black's are not. The move that Ding probably considered but didn't play is bishop to f8. And it's such a beautiful line that we have to check it out as it comes with a pawn sacrifice here. But if white goes for it, and it is objectively the best white has, captures, and now queen captures on b5, now you play knight to c5. And after, let's say, b4, because why not, knight to d3 attacks the rook, and after rook to d1, bishop a6, and black gets a lot of very nice developing moves in. Let's say queen captures on a5, queen captures on c3, and it's a very interesting position. But the problem is, again, as it is with all interesting positions, that let's say bishop to d2, queen to c2, and now rook a to c1, you can sort of force a draw here. Let's say knight captures, rook captures, and after queen to b2, you can just repeat rook to b1, queen to c2, rook to c1, and so on. The queen never wants to come to d3. That's kind of the issue here, because there's always this bishop captures on f7 check move, and now you can't capture back because of knight captures on e5 check, picking up the black queen. So it's a complete mess of a position, but basically with perfect play, it yields nothing more than a draw. I kind of feel silly saying that because all positions are like that, but I mean, it's just incredible that such a mess of a position can just be traded down to a simple draw. But okay, rook to b8 by Ding. He puts the rook here to defend the b pawn, and now knight to h4 by Nepo. Now Nepo wants to put the knight on f5 and sort of start an attack against the black king. Bishop to f8 now, and now queen to f3. You could also consider knight to g6, as of course the f pawn is pinned, but it's not anything spectacular. The bishop will just move, and okay, the knight is on g6, but it's nothing fun to look at. So okay, after bishop to f8, queen to f3, Nepo just mounts the pressure. We have now b captures on on a4. Bishop captures on h6. Nepo offers a full bishop now, but it only seems that way, because if you accept this, then you go into all sorts of problems. Let's say G captures on H6, Queen captures on F6. Now what do you play? If you attack the Queen, let's say Bishop to G7, then there's this very nasty idea of Bishop captures on F7 check, and you can't capture because of Queen captures Rook here, and other moves aren't all that better because you've just lost all of your defenses in front of the Black King. So your best defense would be Rook to D6 to get the Rook out of harm's way and also defend the pawn here, and also Queen to G6 check is no longer a problem. But now you will see a Queen captures on E5, and again, it's tricky but better for white. If Rook captures on B2, you can even play Bishop to C4. And now if Rook captures on F2, which is kind of what you want to play now, if the King captures, Rook to D2 check will pick up the white Queen. But you can just play Knight to G to F5 and everything is fine. White will always be better. If Rook D to D2, you're just going to play Queen to F6 and keep mounting the pressure. If Bishop captures on F5, you're going to play E captures on F5. And now you have to bring the Rook back with Rook to D6, but it's not a problem. Again, just Bishop captures on F7 with check. Queen captures, and now Queen captures on F7. King captures and King captures on F2 leaves you with this position where white is up the exchange, 4 pawns each, so white has excellent winning chances here. So that being said, after Bishop captures on H6, Knight to C5 was played by Ding, and this is in fact the best way to go about it. We have Knight to G6 now by Nepo. You could also consider Bishop to G5, and also I know as you guys are very much interested in this move, Bishop captures on G7 looks like a fine idea, but after Bishop captures on G7, there's Queen to E3. Bringing the Queen into the attack, also putting pressure on the Knight here, and now once you save the Knight, Queen to G5, and now after Knight captures on E1, you're probably thinking, okay, now Knight G to F5, we checkmate Black, but not really. There's Bishop captures on F5, and after Knight captures, just Knight back to E8, defending the Bishop here. And now you don't really have a way of winning. If Knight to H6 check, you're just going to move the King, and if Knight captures on F7, hoping it works, because let's not forget about our good friend the Bishop here, then Knight goes back, Knight to D3, and Black is just up too much material. You have zero compensation here as white. But of course, I know you guys are interested in this move, so we had to check it. But instead, Knight to G6 was played by Nepo, and now Ding plays Rook captures on B2. It's a move, okay, you can consider Rook captures on B2 and Rook to D3 to attack the Queen. Rook to D3, I will also show it because it's a lot of fun, is met with Rook to E3, and now if Rook captures on B2, you're going to play Rook captures on D3, Knight captures, and now even Queen captures on D3, G captures on H6, Knight captures on F8, King captures on F8, and now Bishop to C4. You can see how there are a lot of captures here, and there was certainly a lot to calculate here, but in the end, okay, Black does have the passed pawn here, but it can only be White who's better. Look at that Black King. The defenses in front of him have been messed up. Not fun to play. So instead, just Rook captures on B2 by Ding. Situation on the clock, if you guys are interested, 1 hour for Nepo and 48 minutes for Ding. So and Nepo again ahead on time. But now after Knight captures on F8 and this Rook captures on F8 move, Nepo played Bishop to G5, and he definitely spent his time here. He could consider some other moves like Queen to E3, going after the Knight, then the Knight goes back and so on, but he decided just to threaten Bishop captures on F6, and here he spent quite a lot of time. There are actually 47 minutes both on the clock now. Knight to H7, of course Ding will not allow Nepo to ruin his pawn structure. Bishop to C1 chases away the Rook, and now Rook to B5, and now comes Bishop to A3, pinning the Knight here. You could also consider Bishop to C4. It's a fine idea, but it will be met with Bishop to E6. That's the problem, and I think that Jan knows this, that Ding would very happily allow Bishop captures on B5, followed by C captures, creating this beautiful pawn mass on the queen side. But here we would probably see something like Bishop to F1, and now Rook F to B8. And the game continues, nothing spectacular here. But instead, Bishop to A3 by Nepo. Now comes Rook to E8, so the Knight can now move, and Bishop to C4. But again, Ding just goes Bishop to E6. He says, you can take my Rook here. I'm very much looking forward to fixing my pawn structure and then creating some passed pawns on the queen side. But of course, Nepo doesn't do it. He just plays Bishop captures on E6, and this is the best way to play. Now it's 28 minutes for Nepo and actually 40 minutes for Ding. I don't know if this is the first time It could be the first time that Ding has a significant time advantage on the clock. So 28 to 40 minutes, 13 more moves to be made for time control to be reached. We have knight captures on e6. You have to consider other captures as well, but knight captures definitely makes sense, as you want to bring that knight deeper into the position, and also you want to advance this pawn to c5 and to c4 and so on. So here knight to f5. Another move that you can consider is queen d1, because what's up with the a4 pawn? Seems like if had Nepo played queen to d1, Ding would have to part with this a4 pawn, because if he tries to defend it, then this is met with bishop to d6, attacks the bishop, attacks the e5 pawn, attacks the a4 pawn, and Nepo could get some serious advantage here. But okay, knight to f5 was played, and now we have pawn to c5. We have queen to e2, now putting pressure on the rook here, and rook to b3. Queen to c4 now. It's a very nice square for the queen, just pressuring that a4 pawn again. Here, 28 minutes for both on the time, and 10 more moves to be made for time control to be reached. We have queen to c6, defending the a4 pawn, and now bishop back to c1. We have knight to f6, Ding brings his knight back into the game, and now comes queen captures on a4. If you try rook captures on a4, then you allow rook captures on c3 in between move, and then it's very annoying. If you trade, let's say, queen captures, then black has the 2 pawns here. Okay, let's say f3 defends the e4 pawn, queen to b4, and this is very, very hard to play for white, as the 2 pass pawns will be hard to stop. So instead, after f6, queen captures on a4 was played. Now comes queen captures. We have rook captures on a4 and rook captures on c3. Rook captures on c3 is by no means mandatory, because you of course know that bishop to b2 is coming and you will lose the e5 pawn, but there's no better alternative. For example, if knight to f4, we're just going to trade here. Captures, now pawn to e5 attacks the knight. Let's say knight to d7, and now you're going to trade. Rook captures on f4, rook captures on c3, and you save the f pawn, the e pawn. Black still has the 2 passed pawns, but white should be able to handle them. That's why rook captures on c3 was played, and now bishop to b2 attacks the rook, rook to b2, and bishop captures on e5. We have rook to b4 now, offering a rook trade, and now of course rook captures on a5. We have rook captures on e4, trading pawns basically. Rook captures on e4, knight captures on e4, and now rook to a4, putting pressure on the knight here. 21 minutes each, so it's not a problem, as only 2 more moves need to be made for time control to be reached. We have knight to d4, and here Ding is basically saying, I don't want to deal with all of this pressure you have against my g7 pawn, then and also attacking the knight. Maybe the rook can come help out with the attack. If I move the knight, you can play rook to a7, put pressure this way if, for example, I play something like f6. So not the best. Ding decides to give up a pawn in order to stop the attack, and he will try and hold this being down a pawn. So knight to d4 was played, bishop captures on d4, c captures, and now rook captures on d4. We have pawn to g6, and now knight back to e3. And now it's 3 pawns against 2, bishop and knight and the rook still in the game. So of course you guys know that objectively this is a draw, but players will still play it out with king to g7, rook to b4, and now knight to g3. Ding tries to force a draw right away, because if of course captures, then captures, and again it's a draw only without knights on the board. So Nepo goes for rook to b7. He will try to put some pressure on that f7 pawn. Knight to f5 even offers knight captures on f5, but even this messed up structure for Ding is an easy draw for him, and Ding knows this, Nepo knows this, so of course Nepo doesn't trade. He plays knight to g4. We have rook to e7, now offering a rook trade, and rook to b5. Nepo he's up a pawn, of course he will try to squeeze it as much as possible. We have rook to e1 with check, king to h2, now comes rook to e2, and rook to b7, just keeping the tension on the 7th rank. Knight to d6, and now rook to a7. We have king to f8, and now king to g3. And here was a very possible way for one of the players to blunder the game. Had Nepo played rook to d7, then Ding could consider a move like pawn to f5, sort of to trade knights. But also there are some other moves that he could consider. But basically now, if rook captures on d6 and f captures on g6, now h4 is winning for white, and that could be a big issue. For example, king to g7, king to g3 goes after the pawn, and now if I mean, what do you play here? It's rook to a2. You move the rook so you can capture the f2 pawn if king captures on g4. But of course, rook d4. The rook will be the one who captures. And if king f6, let's say rook captures on g4. Now it's 3 pawns against 1. And of course, this is now winning. So it's one of the ways that it could go down. But Nepo just plays king to g3. We have pawn to f5 now. Now f5 is a good idea. We have king to f3, attacks the rook, and the rook back to e7. Nepo again doesn't trade. He keeps the rooks on the board. Rook to a8 with check. Rook to e8 blocking and only now trading. Rook captures, king captures, and now knight to e5. Now, if Nepo can somehow get his king to g5 without Ding doing anything, then it would be great for him. But that's just not how chess works. So here we have pawn to g5, stopping any infiltrating ideas by the white king, and now pawn to h4. This is a nice attempt. We have g captures on h4, and now king to f4. So he wins the f4 square nonetheless. And the players have already reached time control. They have plenty of time, so time is not an issue here. And there are two moves that don't lose the game for Ding. Do you see those? What the two moves are? Without pausing the video, what would you know if I showed this to you? Like, what would you instantly play? There are, like I said, but two, and one of them was luckily played. One of them is king to e7, the other one is pawn to h3. The point is that if king to e7, you will lose this pawn. Knight to g6 check, you will play king to f6, knight captures, and this is still a draw. It's nothing spectacular. But he tried the other way around. He played pawn to h3. If you play knight to e4, this is another move that he could have tried, which would have cost him the game, because now, yes, you're attacking the pawn here, but after knight d3, defending the pawn, let's say you go back to defend the f5 pawn, now king e5 attacks the knight, and if king e7 defending, now knight to f4 is a big problem. Now knight e4 attacks the pawn, now f3, and if knight back to d6, now you're just going to play knight to g6 with check, king to d7, and now knight captures on h4 with captures on f5 next, and you're going to be up 2 pawns. So knight to e4 would be terrible here. However, king to e7 and h3 are okay for Ding. Ding played pawn to h3, as he will lose the pawn either way. G captures, we have king to e7, and now knight to c6 with check. We have king to f6, and now knight to d4. So now both players basically know it's a draw, but you always have that 1% chance that maybe that's some sort of a spectacular position where maybe white has a mate in 127. You just don't know when you play. I mean, no one knows it all. So here, knight to e4, we have f3, knight to f2, going for the pawn, and h4. Nepo, of course, will advance his passed pawn. Knight to d3 with check, king g3, king to g6, and knight to e6. We have king to f6, knight to f4 offering a trade, and knight to b4. Ding just declines. Of course, you do not want to go into a king and pawn endgame being down a pawn. King f2, king e5, king to e3, and knight to c2 check. King d2, and now knight to d4. You could also trade. King captures on f4 is possible, and this will again be a draw. It will capture on f3. White will start marching forward, but it's still going to be a draw. A fine draw, but a very instructive one for example, for those of you who are new to chess. This will be the position, and the black will have a pass pawn advanced all the way to the 7th rank or the 2nd rank. And for those of you who don't know, yes, this is a draw. Black cannot promote this pawn. The problem is once the white queen gives all the checks, here one final check will be given, and you will not play king to f1 to allow white to start bringing the white king closer. You will play king to h1, threaten promotion, and now only now once white captures, it will be a draw by stalemate. The black king has no move, so that's the problem. But okay, no need to calculate that far. Just knight to d4. We have a nice repetition here. Knight to d3 check, king f6, king to e3, knight to c2 check, and king to f4. We have knight to d4, king g3, knight to e2 check, king f2, knight to d4, knight to f4, and king to e5. So nothing spectacular here. Knight e2 again declining the trade. The king g3, king f6, king g2, king g7, king f2, and now pawn to f4. Ding is feeling very confident about this pawn push. King g1, king g6, king g2, king h6, knight c1, king h5, king h3, knight to d4, knight to d3, and now we have a capture finally. Knight captures on f3, knight captures on f4 with check, and it was in this position on move 82 that Ding, Liren, and Jan Nepomniachtchi agreed to a draw. as there is nothing more to be done here. A few more moves will be played, let's say king h6, pawn to h5, but there is no way to advance the pawn further, 4 more moves, and the knight will capture the pawn. Let's say something like this, the knight will go all the way to g7, and then king h3, knight captures, and h5 will be a draw by insufficient material. So yeah, very interestingly done. So it's interesting that for the first half of the match, Ding sort of resorted to the Morphe's defense, the a6 against the Ruy Lopez, but here he went for the Berlin defense, even though he's down in the match by a point. So that's very interesting. Sort of the idea I believe behind it is he wants to be solid with black, not allow Nepo any winning chances, and look for his chances with the white pieces, as with the white pieces he's been getting some excellent positions. If you haven't seen the previous video of game 8, that Ding just played a brilliant game, and he missed a beautiful win. Do check it out. I definitely recommend it. But yeah, this is game 9. We'll see what happens in the next one, where Ding will again have the white pieces. What will team Ding and team Richard Rapport come up with? I can't wait to see, because so far they've been I mean, they've been incredible, entertaining, and I mean, playing some incredible chess. So yeah, that's the game. I hope you guys enjoyed it. Like I said, very much looking forward to game 10. Tomorrow is a rest day, so the day after tomorrow we continue. I would like to wish a very happy birthday to Costa, and I would like to thank Scott McCrae, Max Sally, Ravishing Reptiles YouTube, and Ricky Black for a contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing the coverage of the World Chess Championship until it finishes. Thank you all. I will see you soon, and have an excellent rest of your day.